Everyone always says the same thing. If I had superpowers, I'd be the happiest person alive. But nobody ever asks the man who actually has them if he's okay. Nobody ever wonders what it's like to hear 1,000 people crying, all at the same time, and only be able to save one. My name is Elias Cross, and I've been carrying the weight of this world for 11 years. Let me tell you why that isn't a gift. Let me tell you why it's a sentence. It started the night I couldn't sleep, not because of nightmares, not because of stress, but because somewhere, 3,000 miles away, a little girl named Maya had fallen into a frozen lake, the ice cracking around her lungs. I was there in 4 seconds. I pulled her out, wrapped her in my cape, left her on her mother's doorstep before the ambulance even got the call. And I went home, sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and felt nothing. No celebration, no relief, just the sound, already beginning, of the next voice, the next scream. A man trapped under rubble. I was already gone before I finished the thought. That was Tuesday. Here's what they don't tell you about being a Superman: you never get to finish a Tuesday. My name before the powers was just Elias. Elias Cross, 26 years old. Worked at a bookshop in Portland. Loved vinyl records and terrible coffee and long walks when it rained. I had a girlfriend named Sarah, a cat named Newton, a small apartment with a broken heater I kept meaning to fix. Then one night, a comet grazed the atmosphere above my city. Most people saw a falling star and made a wish. I made contact with something that shouldn't exist. Within 48 hours, the bookshop burned down in an accident I stopped without thinking. A building collapsed 2 blocks away, and I was lifting steel before the dust settled. A child ran in front of a truck on 5th Avenue, and I was there, hand out, before the driver even blinked. The powers weren't something that happened to me all at once. They unfolded like a punishment wearing the costume of a miracle. First came the strength, then the speed, then the hearing. God, like someone turned up the volume of the entire planet and broke the dial. Then came the worst one. Perception of probability. I don't just see danger, feel it before it happens. A tingling in my chest, like static, that tells me someone is about to die. Within the next few minutes, within the next few seconds. It never stops. Not when I eat, not when I sleep, not when I try to hold a conversation with someone I love. Which is why I no longer eat dinner at tables. Which is why I no longer sleep more than 40 minutes at a time. Which is why Sarah left. Here's what a normal day looks like for Elias Cross. For 17 a.m., I wake up, not because of an alarm, because a static pulse tells me a gas main is about to rupture under a hotel in Tokyo. I'm there in under 7 seconds. I seal the fracture with my bare hands. Nobody knows I was there. 5:03 a.m. Back in Portland. I try to make coffee. The static starts again. 2 signals this time. One in Sao Paulo, one in Lagos. I have to choose. I choose Sao Paulo. A bus has lost its brakes on a mountain road. I make it. Lagos, I'm 4 seconds too late. I stand in the ash of what used to be a market stall, and I look at what I couldn't prevent, and I file it away behind my eyes the way I file everything now, in silence, in stone. By noon, I've prevented 14 deaths and failed to prevent 3. By evening, I've stopped a bridge collapse, 2 armed robberies, a child drowning, and a wildfire that would have consumed a town of 40,000 people. By midnight, I'm sitting on the roof of my building, and I'm crying, not for the ones I lost today. I'll cry for them later, in whatever small corner of silence I can find. I'm crying because I just realized I haven't spoken to another human being, not as Elias, not as a person, in 9 days. The first time I tried to quit, I lasted 6 hours. I told myself, someone else will step up. The world managed before me. The world will manage after. I turned off my awareness, forced it down like holding your breath underwater. Just refused to listen. 6 hours. That's how long it took before the static became a scream I couldn't silence. A school bus. A collapsed overpass. 43 children. I was 2 miles away, paralyzed on a park bench, trying to remember what peace felt like. I made it in time. All 43, not a single one lost. But I sat in that park for a long time afterward, shaking, because I had chosen to look away. And I understood, with a clarity that felt like a knife between my ribs, that I could never do that again, because I was no longer just a person who had powers. I had become the infrastructure. The world had rerouted itself around me the way cities reroute traffic around a new bridge. Quietly, without asking, without consent. Fire departments scaled back response times in cities where I was frequent. Insurance actuaries started building me into their models. Government stopped funding certain emergency protocols because their analysts had quietly noted I was there. I had become load-bearing, and nobody had told me. Nobody had asked. There's a man named Director Harlan Voss. He runs a classified division of a government agency I was never supposed to know existed. He found me 8 months into the powers. Not to thank me, to manage me. He came to my apartment, my broken heater apartment, sat across from me at my small kitchen table, and slid a folder across the wood. Inside was a dossier. Every intervention I'd made. Time-stamped, GPS mapped, photographed from satellites I hadn't known were watching. You've prevented 847 deaths in 243 days, he said, like he was reading quarterly earnings. Impressive efficiency, minimal collateral exposure, clean record. I stared at him. We'd like to discuss optimization, he continued. Certain events, natural disasters, structural failures, are being allowed to happen because the economic cost of prevention isn't justified by current models. We'd like to redirect your attention toward higher priority targets. I asked him what that meant. He showed me a second folder. It was a list of events the agency had quietly decided were acceptable losses. Hundreds of them. Communities, mostly poor, remote, undocumented. You can't be everywhere, he said. Not unkindly. We're simply asking you to be somewhere useful. I stood up. I told him to leave. He left, but before he reached the door, he turned back, and he said something I've never forgotten. You don't get to opt out, Mr. Cross. You stopped being a person the moment you became necessary. The only question now is whether you're necessary in a controlled direction or a random one. He was right about one thing. I had stopped being a person, but he was wrong about who controlled the direction. 3 weeks later, I discovered the truth that changed everything. The comet, the thing that had given me the powers, it hadn't been an accident. I'd been searching, quietly, between saves, between collapses and disasters, piecing together fragments from declassified documents and satellite data, and a physicist in Reykjavik who owed me a favor. The comet hadn't grazed the atmosphere. It had been guided by a signal originating from Earth, from Voss's agency. They hadn't discovered me after I developed powers. They had created me. I was an experiment in sustainable emergency response, a living infrastructure investment. They had identified me, quiet, compassionate, no family, no political ties, years before, had selected me, had arranged the exposure with surgical precision. The broken heater in my apartment? They'd arranged that too, to keep me from leaving Portland before the event. I sat with that knowledge for a long time, in the silence between the static pulses. Every person I had saved, 847, then 1,200, then 3,000, every moment of grief and loneliness and severed connection, had been engineered. My entire second life had been a design document, and I, the person who could bend steel and outrun lightning and hear a heartbeat from 50 miles, had never once heard the trap closing around me. That night, Sarah came to see me. I don't know how she knew, maybe the same way she always knew, that quiet intuition she had. She didn't knock. She still had the key. I'd never asked back. She found me on the roof. I was sitting at the edge, not like I was going to jump. I was past the point where things like that felt like options. I was sitting at the edge because it was the only place in the city where the wind was loud enough to drown out the static. Just barely. She sat next to me without saying anything for a long time. Then she said, "You look like someone who's been carrying something that was never meant for one person." I told her what I discovered. About Voss. About the comet. About all of it. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say it wasn't fair. She'd always been too honest for comfort. She said, "So what do you do now?" And I told her the truth. I don't know how to stop. Even knowing what I know, even knowing they made me, I heard for signals on the way up here, for people who won't make it without me. And I'm still going to go, because they're real. They didn't choose this either. And neither did I. She was quiet for a long time. Then she took my hand, and she said, "That's not strength, Elias. That's grief. Strength would be letting someone help you carry it." I looked at her. "No one can," I said. "No," she agreed. "Not the way you carry it. But you don't have to be alone on the roof while you carry it." I didn't say anything. The static pulsed. "Go," she said, "but come back. Not as Superman, as Elias." And for the first time in 11 years, someone had called me by my real name. I went. I always go. I sealed a fault line beneath a coastal village in Japan. By the time I left Japan, my jacket was torn, my sleeves were burned through, and it was obvious normal clothes weren't built for this. Months earlier, after the first few rescues shredded everything I owned, I'd had something made that could survive the work. I kept it hidden longer than I should have. But after Japan, I finally started using it. I pulled a father from a submerged car in Argentina. I caught a falling construction crane in Berlin before it turned a crowd of 200 people into a statistic. Then I came back. It was almost dawn. Portland glowing copper and gold under the low clouds. Sarah had left the light on. I landed on the roof, slowly, quietly, and I stood there for a moment just breathing. Below me, The city moved. Indifferent. Beautiful. Full of people who would wake up and drink coffee and argue and fall in love and break apart and grieve and laugh and never once know that someone above them was bleeding from the inside out to keep the ground beneath their feet intact. And I thought about Voss's folder, about the agency, about everything I'd been made to carry without consent. I was going to dismantle it, not with violence, not with anger, with documentation, with exposure, with the particular devastation of the truth delivered to the right people at the right time. They'd made a weapon out of compassion. They hadn't counted on the weapon reading the dossier. I walked down from the roof. I knocked on my own door. Sarah opened it. She didn't say anything. She just stepped aside, and I walked into the small apartment with the broken heater. The heater that they had sabotaged to keep me here. The heater I had never fixed. I reached down, pressed 2 fingers against the copper pipe, let a small, precise, controlled amount of heat pulse through my palm. The heater came on. It was the first thing I had ever fixed just for myself. They'll tell you that power is a gift, that strength means never needing anyone, but the bravest thing I ever did wasn't saving 3,000 lives. It was knocking on a door and admitting I couldn't save myself. Maybe that's true for all of us. Power doesn't make you invincible. It just makes it harder to ask for help.